There is a company that could be called one of the absolute pillars of the muskie industry, and that's Musky Mayhem Tackle. They're celebrating 20 years of hurting shoulders and wrists and dreams, making dreams, putting personal bests in the boat. Anybody who's been anybody in the industry in the past 20 years has thrown a double cowgirl and either loved it or hated it, depending on how you look at it. And there's very few people in this industry that you can talk to, I can talk to, that can say they altered the trajectory of musky fishing. And that's just one aspect of what Brad, and I don't have his wife Carrie here tonight, but she's a big part of what Musky Mayhem Tackle is. Brad Hoppe, welcome to 54 Bust. And when I started doing this series over the winter, I wanted to talk to my heroes in the muskie industry. I wanted to talk to the people I look up to and the people that help shape the industry as I see it from my eyes. And you were one of those those people, that company. I don't remember the first fish I caught on a Musky Mayhem bucktail, but I know I threw a lot of them early on and we still throw them. But how many times have you heard from people, I caught a big fish on a cowgirl?
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, thanks for having me, Glenn. This is always fun to do. I look back, I think 2005 was our first official year, if you will. We were already making baits in like 2003. That's when we started. But 2005, we became official July 1st. And in that season alone, I know that we had like 325 people reach out to us that had caught a 50-inch fish on a cowgirl. So literally that one season, our very first season of really becoming an official business, we surpassed Muskie's Inc. all-time record of 50-inch fish caught on a particular bait. And we acquired Eagle Tail at that same time, July 1st of 05. And that was the trend leader at that time. Eagle Tails had more 50s registered on Muskie's Inc. than any other bait. So pretty cool to beat that in 1 year when we bought a business that was 23 years old. So pretty wild.
Take us back to 01, 02, 03, when that idea, think of like that movie Inception, where did that little spark come from? I wasn't the musky angler I am today. Back then, I had some friends kind of show me. Ironically enough, they were from Green Bay, up my way, fishing Indian Lake chain of all places, and they took me out, and that's where I caught my first quote unquote real muskie, not incidental. And that was prior to the cowgirl. I don't even remember exactly what we were using, to be honest. Like, that was so long ago. But what was the world of Brad Hoppe like in that early 2000s as you started to find out what it was you wanted to create?
Sure. Well, I can start back in 88. I graduated high school in 88. That summer, I was asked to do a guide trip, and it wasn't for muskies, but that's kind of when my first initial guide side came about. From there, I moved out west and I did some big game hunting and guiding. And then in the late 90s, I had been fishing muskies, and muskies were something that my dad really inspired to catch. And for a lack of a better way, my dad was a crappy fisherman. He was really bad. As an example, 30-pound Dacron for bluegills. It just doesn't work that well. Yeah, you catch some fish, but anyway, his dream was, and honestly, he had been to Eagle Lake multiple times right up near neck of the woods. Mm-hmm. And I remember going on those trips as a kid, and I absolutely hated muskies. And the reason I hated them is we weren't having any success. I mean, I think I remember one time when I was maybe 14 where we had a follow, and I'm like, whoa. And that kind of changed me a little bit. But like everybody, I entered the world of fishing with bluegills, panfish, switched to bass and pike. Then eventually it became walleyes. And muskies kind of hit me, I think in 95 94 is where that really kind of started registering and became a part of my life. And even with that, I'll be honest, I caught my first one. I think it was the first day that we went fishing, 36, 38 inches, something like that. And I really wasn't ruined yet. It didn't really stick. And so the next day, the guy I was fishing with put one, and back then we didn't use the nets that we use today. We were using a, help me out here. I can't even think of what you call it, a cradle. And so,
okay, yeah.
I have the cradle out. He pulls this fish in there. The cradles were 48 inches long. This fish is hanging out both ends of this cradle, and it ruined me. And I said, I'm never quitting until I get a fish like that. And crazy enough, we didn't even take a measurement of that fish, but it was 50 inches for sure. And it ruined me. It really changed my life. And that's when I really dug in. And I spent every day fishing after work. And as that progressed, one of our local bait shops here in Alexandria, they begged me for a couple of years. They had different people looking to fish Lake Miltona, and they wanted guide trips. Well, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if I really want to get into it, but I did. I think 98 was the first time I ever did a musky guide trip. And by 2000, I was all in. I was like, all right, we're going to start booking trips. I met Greg Thomas. Greg ended up helping me a ton in those early years in 2000 through 2003, helping me build a clientele. And then the bait sides kind of started coming about. And then 02 and 03, I had met Carrie in 2000. I think we started dating in 2001. And I wanted to build a crankbait because I'm a huge crankbait guy. I like big, giant crankbaits. It's always been something that I'm passionate about. And so I was going down that path. And I actually just found recently some of the crankbaits that I had made back then. And Carrie went a different direction. So we walked into Thorne Brothers, and they had the fly angler, which they still have today. And she found Flashabou, and it was hanging in the fly angler. And nobody was using Flashabou in the musky industry at that time. And she bought some. I have no idea why. I'm just like, well, whatever, get it if you want it. And from there, she started tying skirts. And that's kind of how the whole bait side started growing. And so I can't even take claim to any of it. It was her idea. She tied the very original Showgirl that we still sell today, the single blade with an Indiana blade, held it up to me. And I go, yeah, okay, it's just another bait. No big deal, right? Well, she begged me. And this was in 2003. She's like, Brad, tonight, I want to go with you. I want you to throw this bait. We need to catch fish on it. And I caught a 53 and a half, which was my PB at that time in 2003, the very first night I threw the Showgirl. And I'll be honest, Glenn, I literally just went, what are we doing here? This is bizarre, but now I'm kind of stuck. I've got to keep throwing these baits. And so I did with my clients and what have you. And as that season progressed in 03, we started catching a ton of fish on them. And we went back to Thorne Brothers, and this is how the Cowgirl was born. So Carrie wanted to build a big, giant bladed bait that was made for trolling. And the reason the Cowgirl name came about, actually, Greg Thomas named it Showgirls. And where that came about was, he goes, they look like Vegas showgirls. And so that stuck. That's how the Showgirl name came about. And then from there, we use the big cowbell blade. I don't know if you're familiar. They use them salmon fishing as a flasher, basically. And I don't even know. It's bigger than our 13 blade that we currently have with the supermodels or whatever. So this giant cowbell blade, that's what they called it. That's what Carrie started making. And it was 18 inches long. And I'm trying to remember, I think there was like 8 ounces of weight on this thing because she wanted to keep it in the water column, right? So a buddy of mine starts casting this bait, and lo and behold, he starts catching 50-inch fish with it. And it was bizarre. I have a feeling that a lot of that was to do with the water column that he was turning that bait in. And so that bait was getting down deeper. It was getting closer to some of those bigger fish that were maybe a little bit lazier, that wouldn't come up and chase, high in the water column. And I think he caught 350s on it. And then we went to Thorne Brothers again, and there was a box of blades, and it was sitting against the wall. And it was, I mean, I don't even know. There's thousands of blades in this box, from tiny little blades to number 10s. And so in that box was number 10 blades. Now, number 10 blades, I think Bruce Shumway gets credit for the number 10 blade, and it never took off. And so we didn't know that at that time. And so she started making a double bladed Cowgirl. And the cowbell name came up with the Cowgirl because we had the Showgirl. And so she made a double bladed version. Well, she got frustrated trying to cast that thing. So she downsized it to the size that we know today. And that's when everything kind of broke loose. So the fall of 2003, we were catching giant fish on a Cowgirl. And that was the real beginning. So I can't take claim for hardly any of this other than maybe putting some fish in the boat.
Well, behind every good man is a great woman. I would say the same thing for me. My muskie journey, while I dabbled early on, it wasn't until I met my wife and her family and started going up to Long-Legged and Stork Lake, which ironically, Bruce Shumway used to go up to Long-Legged a lot before I started going up there. I don't believe I ever seen him up there. I started going up there in like 2008, and I don't recall him going up there at that time, but Mena was going up. There was a few other guys. Messacomer was still going up that way, but that's where I started to get more into the muskie fishing. And I'll just tell you kind of a quick story. I had caught probably my first kind of official muskie with my friends from Green Bay, and I caught one off the dock. I lived on Indian Lake Chain for a while, and it was give or take 44 inches. So it was a pretty nice fish off the dock opening weekend. And after that, I didn't really catch one it was quite a long time. And I remember I caught a couple with my wife and her brother. And fast forward a few years to like 2009, 2010, and I missed one that we thought at the time would have been like my first 50. I got a 47 that weekend, and then the next morning I went out solo, had one of those perfect condition mornings, and I was tossing a dancing raider, the little Joe Booker dancing raider, and I got a 49 and had another one on that was probably bigger, and that was the moment for me that was like, yeah, this is it. This is where I'm going now. And I remember I sent Carrie a picture. It was a showgirl fish. It was one of the all pink showgirls, and it come from Long-Legged, and it was actually just after dark. There's a place there. It's called the Lift. Anybody that's been up there, it's a little rock narrows, and I caught it. We had raised a really nice one, and like all the stories go, you raise a nice one, you go back, you hook it, you think you got it, and it's not that one. But I remember that one was one of the ones I got on that little showgirl. And over the years, we've used a lot of your baits. I mean, anybody in this game has thrown, one or multiple of your baits. When you guys brought that to the market July 1st of 2005, obviously there was word getting around that you guys were catching on it. I'm going to assume there was some buzz behind that. What was it like when you brought that to the market? Were you at all worried? Was there any backlash, pardon the pun there, on bringing that double Cowgirl? And just to put it in context for people that don't remember the time, there was no reels that could handle this stuff. It was a different time in the industry. You guys literally created a reel segment when the Abu winch came out that was designed to pull these big bladed bucktails. And what was that like from your perspective and from Carrie's perspective when you guys decided you were going public with this?
Well, amazingly enough, I think our very first show that we did was in 04, if I remember right. And we did that show primarily because the summer of 04, we were thinking about making this official. And Raleigh and Helen's Jim Stewart and his brother were here, and they were fishing Miltona. They grew up fishing the lake. They were both from Iowa, and they would come up here and spend their childhood here. So anyway, I talked to Jim. He was on the water. I said, hey, you might want to look at this bait. And so he says, Brad, he goes, we have so many bucktails in the shop. I don't know that we're really interested. And I said, yeah, that's no problem. He goes, but let's meet at the access at dark, and I'll take a look. So they show up, and him and his brother goes, well, which color should I use? And I go, tomorrow, if it's really sunny, I said, which it's supposed to be, throw this pink cowgirl. And he did, and he caught it like a 51 or a 52. I can't remember exactly. And that was it. They were like, yeah, we'll take those baits. So Thorn Brothers, I had a really good relationship with all the guys at Thorns because I worked with them all the time on different stuff already. And they basically said, listen, you come to the show, and this would have been 05 now, but it was January, right? We're still not official. And they said, if you can sell 100 bucktails, we'll put you in the store. So Carrie and I went there. We had our own tower out by the aisle. We had a photo album. We showed everybody. We got laughed at. People were looking at us like, oh, you got Christmas tree ornaments, ha, 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 and they walk away. But we roped in, I think 104 or 106 people bought showgirls and cowgirls at that time. And so that put us in that store. So now we're in 2 stores. And I'll never forget it, Glenn. We had a card table in our old shop, and I'm sitting there twisting wires. Carrie's over tying skirts, and we're assembling on this little card table. And I think our first order, was Raleigh and Howland's. And I don't know. I can't remember the real number, but say they ordered 100 baits. And when they did that, it took us like 5 or 6 days to build those baits. I mean, it was pretty funny. It just progressed. And where it really came about, and I always give Greg crap about this because Greg Thomas had the baits in 03 when I was playing with him, right? He never threw them. And in 05, Jason Hammernick happened to be, he was coming to the cabin that I used to stay at when I was guiding on Mille Lacs. And a buddy of mine had left a few cowgirls sitting on the table. And he goes, hey, whose are these? And I said, oh, they're Rick's. He goes, can I throw them? I said, yeah, go ahead and throw them. Well, he went out that night and caught 350s on a cowgirl. And that's when it really took off, because all of a sudden Jason catches 350s on a cowgirl. Greg starts pulling his cowgirls out. Luke Ronestrand calls me for cowgirls. Lee Talkin was calling. Josh Borowski. All these guys that were guiding on Mille Lacs wanted cowgirls. And that's how it really sparked. We were doing 2 to 3 orders a week for Thorn Brothers because the box would show up and the people were just grabbing. And I don't know, it was pretty wild. If you were on the north end of Mille Lacs in 05, 06, 07, 08, it sounded like jingle bells up there because you could hear the blades flying through the air. So it was pretty cool.
It's interesting to hear you say that in 2025, because now we think of the cowgirl as, it's like a, dare I say, like a legacy bait almost. And every year at show season, it's like, ooh, what's going to be that bait this year? And early on in the shows, and it was your bait. And your story reminds me of talking with Brad Rue and him sitting outside of outside of the show in the hallway and talking with Mark from Red October. And it's these baits that didn't really have a spot to sit in. It was something different. And I would argue those 3 baits are 3 of the biggest baits in the muskie industry right now. It's just so interesting to hear your story. And I think for a lot of newer viewers, newer people in the industry, they weren't there when that craze happened. And I only vaguely remember it up here just by, going to the sports shop, Bobby's Sports Shop, or hearing it from friends who were guides. And it was like, have you tried this bait? Like, this bait is insane. And you'd look at it and you're like, Jesus, what is that thing? It's huge. Like, what are you going to do with that? When you compared that to the little Mepps Muskie Killer, it was just like, it was a shock to the system. And what, going through those first couple show seasons when this thing was still, new and it hadn't been copied too much yet, what was that like from your perspective, Brad? Like, did it feel like mission accomplished, or was it still, were you still waiting for like the bottom to fall out on it? Like, what was your feelings, like your gut feelings on that?
So Carrie lasted about 3 months with her real job. And she's like, I got to go full time. And I'm like, yep, I get it. So I continued working my full time job, still guiding. And I did that for 3 more years. So I think they called it a retirement, but I quit my real job in '08. It was overwhelming. I'll be honest with you. We didn't have time to really celebrate. We just put our heads down and we worked. And we worked a lot of hours. And we still do today. I pride myself in my work ethic, and something that's a perfect fit for musky fishing too. I mean, if you're not willing to work, you're probably not going to be a musky angler. And so we just put our heads down. I'll tell you this: we lived on frozen pizzas because we didn't have time to cook. We didn't have time to go out to eat. So I think we burnt out 2 pizza makers in our old shop. I mean, literally, we burnt them out because we used them so much. And we did that for probably 5-7 years, where that's what we did. I mean, and it was year round. So honestly, we just didn't have the time to celebrate. We put our heads down and we just worked. And I've always been one, like at the shows, I kind of stick to my own booth. I don't wander around. I don't want to get a cluttered brain by somebody else's new idea. And unique part of this, you're talking about Brad Russom. I want to say he's been around 32 years. Is that?
I think that
Yeah,
sounds
so
right.
he's been around for 32 years, and his first initial startup, I would say, was a little bumpier than ours. We were very fortunate. And one of the things that I'd say takes place, at least in our world that I've seen it, Minnesota kind of followed us more than anybody else. Then it slowly trickled into Wisconsin, and then it slowly trickled into Illinois. And those 3 states, that's, the shows that we do the Chicago show, the Milwaukee show, and the Minnesota show. You can see it, how it evolved. It just slowly built. And so it was kind of interesting in that fact too, how it spread throughout the country. And now we're in West Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee. And I mean, we're all over the place, right? We're selling baits in Montana and Canada. We've sold overseas. Italy, Germany, Sweden, all of Scandinavia. So it's pretty bizarre, but it's been a wild ride, a crazy 20 years, and we've loved every minute of
it. That is awesome. There's a couple things in there I kind of wanted to touch on. And the first one that comes to mind when you're saying that you had to buckle down and just work, I think from the outsider's point of view, when we started seeing double cowgirls, just saying that was Musky Mayhem tackle at the time, that's the one that was the most obvious. When we started seeing that all over in Canada, you started seeing it in some of like the department stores and whatnot, it felt like it was a big box company. And I think there was this perception outside of the core of musky fishing that this is just a mass produced bait. Brad and Carrie aren't touching it. It's just something that they get built. It gets, hung on the wall, stamped with a price. And I was guilty of that. That I always thought that was something that was just, another one of these mass produced baits. I early on didn't realize that you guys touched, and handled every single one. And I think there's a lot of viewers out there that now, in today's world with social media being what it is, I think a lot of people obviously know it's different, but there had to be a big period of time there where people probably didn't realize it was you and Carrie doing all that work and whoever else was helping, and child labor being what it is today with your daughter. What was that like? Am I
No,
making that up in my mind, or is that something that was true?
you're 100% right, Glenn. We were called Chinese. So it's kind of funny. Carrie's brother has tied for us full time since Oh, the end of '05. He ties 98% of the skirts that we get. My mother-in-law ties the other 2%. And then like some of the hair stuff, we have another company, J3 out of Brainerd, that does some of the hair, like the squirrels. They do some of the eagle tail stuff for us now. But otherwise everything's done, and it's almost family based. So it's Carrie and I, her brother, he does the tying. Mother helps do some tying. She does a lot of the packaging. She comes every Monday, does all the package baits that we put out to the box stores. My parents are snowbirds. They go to Texas in the winter, and they have spent countless hours in our shop as well. And then I can't forget a bunch of friends. I mean, in the very beginning, several of my friends helped me so much. You can't even imagine it. And I'm in debt to them for sure, because they were a big part of our success early. That's for sure. So it's been a wild ride. I mean, we heard it all the time. You know, I've seen it with some of the different knockoffs that have come out over the years. And I'd be talking to a guy that I guided for 3-5 years, and he'd be sitting there chomping. I'll come back, Brad. I got to go over here and buy this. And I'm like, why are you buying that? And they're like, they're handmade, as we're standing there in the booth building custom baits. So all of our baits are handmade. Remarkably enough, until about 2-3 years ago, I bent probably 98% of the baits. So we'd have different home assemblers that would assemble baits at their house, bring this kit back to us, and I would stand there and bend every one of them. And if you don't believe it, you can listen to the shoulder grind a little bit. But since then, we've built an auto bender. Pretty much anybody can bend a bait now. Actually, we just had a whole group. We've done this for the last 5 years, probably. We bring in our local elementary school second graders that come here, and they all get to do a plant tour. And our plant is not like what you'd think a plant is, right? I mean, it's a shop. But they all get to build their own bait, and they all get to hit the button on the auto bender, bend it, take it back, and then Carrie's mom helps them package it, and they go home with a bait in the package. So it's kind of a cool thing. But like I said, anybody can do what we're doing today, where when we were hand bending everything, that was a challenge for sure. And all the tooling that we've done, myself and some friends, we've built all of our tooling that we use in the shop today. So
that's awesome. I do want to touch on that a little bit more, but when you said that there's baits all over the world, that led me to a question I got from one of my Patreon followers, and I'm going to put it on screen here and I'll read it out. What is the most weird, exciting, never imagined place that one of your lures has caught a fish? And this is from my buddy, somebody who I've guided, James. And I like that question. That's something I would ask. Where has a story came in from that you never would have thought a Musky Mayhem bait would have caught, or a type of fish or something interesting?
I'll give you a few examples. One, I'll start with maybe the weakest one, right? So somewhere in, I think, Galveston, Texas, a guy caught some tarpon on Cowgirls. So that was kind of cool. Then shortly after that, we had a guy on the East Coast. I think he was out of Massachusetts. He's out tuna fishing, and he basically, I think he took the 7/0 off, put single hooks on, and he caught a 200 and some pound tuna on Cowgirls. So that was really cool. And if you look back on Facebook or maybe Instagram, you'd see some of those pictures. One of the most unique ones, though, number one in my mind, which I would have never dreamt, was recent, and it's happening still today. 2 or 3 years ago, we had some people reach out to us. They wanted grenades, and now since the mini grenade came out, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, they switched to mini grenades because they think the hooking percentage is better. But they're catching alligator gar in Texas on grenades, which it dumbfounds me. I got to go do it. I want to go do that trip. The problem is it's in July or August, but I need to go do it. I've always wanted to catch an alligator gar, and for catching them on grenades, I would have never dreamt in a million years, but it's very effective. They're catching anywhere from 10 to 20 a day on grenades.
That's crazy. No, that's awesome. I appreciate you answering that for James. He's been a big
For sure.
supporter of ours and the channel, and he'll be coming up here and fishing with me again this summer. So he'll appreciate that. So shout out to James there. When you're talking about the hand, bending it all by hand and doing it yourself. And again, from my perspective in 2007, 2008, 2010, even, it was, oh, this is that quote unquote mass produced bait. When around that time, and I wasn't going to the shows and stuff, and I wasn't as deep into the industry, and obviously social media wasn't then what it
Sure.
is now. When did this quote unquote boutique bait craze start, Brad, that seems to have permeated the shows with show colors and different styles of baits? And when did that start, and how did that change just marketing and the way that you guys did things with Musky Mayhem?
Well, I wouldn't say it changed our marketing ploy whatsoever. The creation of the TV show has helped us with some marketing, but honestly, we use everything. So, I mean, it isn't just for that.
Mhm.
It's more about the fish. But so the marketing avenue, I wouldn't say changed a whole lot for us. I believe that our products are a staple bait. They're going to last a long period of time, and I think that's important. But and the cool thing is, people say, "Well, I don't throw them anymore because all the fish have seen them." Well, we're not fishing the same fish we were fishing 20 years ago. I'm sorry, most of those are gone now, right? So every year, I still continue to catch fish on all of our product, and surprisingly well. So the boutique side of things, boy, I don't know what year, Glenn, but it's been probably a good 10 years, I would say, and it's changed, right? I mean, it might have come out with True Glide, I think, was kind of the start of that small batch company, right? So you've seen him start coming to the shows, and he's doing some gliders, and then it kind of started growing into crankbaits, and you name it, he was building that. And I would say he was probably one of the first to really kind of crack that code. And then there was a lot of garage builders that super talented people out there, right? Started showing up with smaller batches and asking more money for it, and well deserved, because they're building some stuff that is very unique. Some that run really good, some that they probably haven't been tested real well. And that's one thing that Musky Mayhem Tackle has always prided themselves on, is we test our products at least a full season before we'd ever release it to the public. And I know that sounds kind of dumb. I mean, we're building a bucktail, but at the end of the day, it has to come out of the package or out of the bag. And you or anybody else, maybe it's a first-time fisherman, they need to be able to run that bait and not have any flaws in it. And I think that's very important. And I want to know that it's proven that it does catch fish.
To that point, and I'm not going to say any names, but we early on in our musky fishing with my wife's family, there actually is a couple things here I want to mention, but I had bought a couple competitor baits, and I caught a really nice, like a mid 40s fish on it. And after that, it never ran. It never engaged right away. You'd have to snap it, pull it. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. My brother-in-law, he tried, tightening the clevises, tweaking it. We could just never get it to run. I was so upset because I like that color so much. It worked so good.
Right.
And all of a sudden it was just one of those baits that I just could not throw anymore. And it was so upsetting. I bought another one exactly like it, and it also did not run the way I wanted it to. In today's world, I just take it to the shop. I'd take it apart. I'd rewire it. I'd do something to it. Now I understand how baits work, but it is a big thing to get a bait out of a package and have it work, because let's face it, nothing's cheap in today's world. And a lot of people, especially younger anglers, newer anglers, it's a big ask to get people into musky fishing. So every dollar that you put in, you got to make sure you get something for it. So I appreciate that you take the time to tune it, make sure it works, make sure any of your new prototypes work. um it it would be real easy to just make the grenade, catch a couple fish on it, and throw it out there and be like, well, hopefully this is going to work for everyone. But you guys didn't. And again, I appreciate that. But I want to go to Justin asked a question here. Can you still get the old brass original blades? And the reason that kind of triggered me, ironically enough, it's not the trigger, but my brother-in-law Jeff, he used to tinker with baits a lot, and he had a cowgirl that was, I believe it was the original brass blades, with that purple skirt, and he cut it apart and he put one of the fire tiger blades on with that brass blade, and it had just a different sound. You could hear it beside the boat in the figure eight. It sounded different. Him and I went out on long legged on a complete bluebird sky. I should have saved that picture. And he got the biggest 48 that you would have thought was 50 of your life on that thing after he tinkered with it, basically in the lodge. And after that, I was like, I don't know what that bait is, but I got to find that bait. And I went and bought one off the shelf, and it wasn't the same bait. It just didn't have that same sound. So maybe touch on that, Brad, like
Sure.
those original brass blades.
Well, it's interesting, Glenn, because there's certain baits that you put them on and you throw them and you can hear it. I mean, you'll hear it. One of the ways that you do it is if you have a steel leader, which I use only steel leaders, stealth leaders, and I literally put it tight against the tip, and I'll put the rod up against my ear like this, and I can move it in the water, and you can really, really hear. It's like a stethoscope. Mm-hmm. You can hear what that bait's doing. For some reason, there are certain baits that make that clicking noise that I have never been able to duplicate, and I don't know why. Now, I will tell you, the longer you throw these baits, the louder they start to get. And one of the other things that I do a lot of times, I'll get a brand new bucktail and I'll just bend it and then try to straighten it back out. And you never get all the kinks out, right? But that does help it. It will get noisier that way. Why it does that, I don't know. And it isn't just those original brass blades. It can be double nickel. It could be black nickel and orange. It doesn't matter. One will make it and the next one won't. And I don't know why. I've tried to figure it out because there is something to that. But it seems like once you have a bait that catches fish, it's going to continue to catch fish. And as an example, I'll have somebody come in to the show and they'll say, I caught one fish on this, and the thing's bent like this, right? Well, I'll take that bait from them. Can you replace it? And I go, I can. I go, but I get to keep this one. And they go, well, what do you mean you get to keep that one? I go, this one's proven. It works. And I'll just straighten it back out, and I'll say, there, it's back to new. And they usually end up grabbing that bait because they caught on it, and then they buy a couple more. So there's just certain baits that really stand out and make really cool noise. I've had a bunch of different clients over the years. They'll only pull it out at sunset, or they'll pull it out when they see a window open, and they just have a tremendous amount of confidence in that particular bait. Fishing gets tough, they put it on. So I wish I could duplicate it, and I wish I could make every bait that we build with that same clicking noise, and I don't know what it is. Played with clevises, played with the wires, played with so many different things, and I cannot figure it out.
Well, I think that's part of the magic of bait building. Some of them, they just work. And I see Duff commented here, Gar made baits for the alligator gar. And we were down at Duff's shop recently. Yep. And that was such a cool experience for us. But I'm sure Duff would tell you his baits are all made the same, but there's going to be the odd one that just has something special. It does something more, and that's the beauty of these handmade baits. One thing that you guys do is everything outside of, I believe, like the supermodels or the trolling girls are all on the 051 wire, correct? Like that's something that you guys have kept as like a staple of your lineup. And I remember talking to you quite a few years ago, and you had said exactly what you just said here. The more you run this thing, the more it's going to kind of find its sweet spot. And just touch on that. What was the thought process behind just sticking with that wire? Because I do know in today's world, a lot of people like to go to the heavier wire for a multitude of reasons. Dave and I, we always stop by going to that heavier wire. You got that little bit extra weight, cast better, and you didn't get that bend or twist as much in a bait. And if it did, in most cases, it was junk because you couldn't get that kink back out. So, like, what was the thought process for you and Carrie on that? Because I know there was some pushback on Carrie when I asked for some 062 wire.
So where it really comes from, Glenn, is when we originally started, we played with both, right? And honestly, we caught more fish on the 051. The other part to that is the thickness of the blades. We choose to use a 25 thousandths thick, and the reason that we do that is you get more thump, and on a thinner blade, they stand out further away from the shaft. When you have a thick blade, they ride tighter to the shaft. You're going to push more water when it stands out away from the bait. So that's where it came from. I mean, it literally was just, we caught more fish with the 051. And there is something special about that. Like I said, you bend those baits and they're going to make more noise in the water. And guess what? You're going to catch more fish because of it. Now, if you look at our supermodel or our detonator, the grenades, they're all on 062. So there's a purpose for that and there's a place for that. But I still think, I mean, look at your best spinner baits. If you looked at a safety pin spinner bait, the best ones are the ones that are going to break because of metal fatigue. They're thinner wire. They thump more. There's more flex. Plain and simple.
And that makes sense. And I dug out a couple baits here, and this is one of the ones that I went looking for, and it's gold and I think kind of a cranberry with a smoke and a brass or gold blade. This one's got a couple fish on it for me. And this one actually was twisted right in half, and I actually just straightened it out. And I believe I changed the top hook because we actually cut a hook on this one, which we do a lot of. We cut a lot of hooks. But I, for a long time, personally thought we had to go to that heavier wire for just, I think a lot of it was in my head. Like, I think a lot of us, it gets in our head. And what I have found over the years is that if I don't think about it near as much, it doesn't make any difference to me as an angler. And it's one of those things, I think, as musky anglers, we're so detail orientated that I think sometimes we worry so much we actually forget about the details that matter. And who was I talking to recently? It was about the one bait that you'll never catch on is the one that you don't clip on. And we are all guilty of that. We all say we're going to use this or try this or looking forward to this. And then we get caught up just using those same baits over and over and over. But it goes right back to what you just said there, Brad, that when you find the right cowgirl that just has that, whatever it is, it's hard to not go with that. And we've all had baits like that. I mean, people that have watched me know what we've leaned on. People that have watched you guys know what you lean on. And there's something special about finding confidence in something. Touch on that, Brad, because you've obviously used every bait that's probably ever been built. And outside of your own baits, what gives you confidence in a bait? How do you find that confidence in something else?
Well, it's funny. You have to play with everything, right? I mean, because if you're not going to find your confidence in a particular bait. So, first of all, I believe every cast I ever make, I'm going to catch a fish. Every cast I make, I think I'm going to catch. And that comes with a weird confidence in yourself and in what you're doing, right? Second of all, when it comes to a bait style or what have you, you can rely on some other people around you, but you still have to have that inner confidence in the product that you're throwing. So that comes through hours. It comes through time, hard effort on the water. I mean, plain and simple, the musky game is about putting your time in and finding success.
Yeah, I couldn't I couldn't agree more. It's for us, and just from my personal experience, Brad, and I don't have the experience that you do in this game, but I know for myself early on, I lacked confidence so much. I would get frustrated in the boat, and we would lose a fish boat side, and you'd blame it on the net job. You'd do all kinds of things, and my brother-in-law, he had the summer off. He had some knee issues, and he was able to fish almost all summer on the West Arm of Eagle, and actually got it dialed in pretty good. Got a couple big fish, lost probably a fish of a lifetime out there. And my wife and I were fishing with him one evening, and on Stretch Reef, one of the most famous spots on the West Arm of Eagle, I hooked into like a 48 or 50-ish fish on a toad, and the net flattened out in the water when Jeff went to scoop it. And I don't know if I cried, but I was damn near there, because I was like, that was my first real big fish on Eagle Lake. And it was just, I had just zero confidence. And over the course of that summer, things started to change. Fishing with Jeff really helped. Fishing with somebody that has confidence around the boat really helped. Fishing with, another friend like Michael Grant up here, he's kind of like a local legend. He's got so much confidence in the boat. I started to learn confidence. And now when people come fish with me, they're like, oh, you have so much confidence from the back of the boat throwing a tube or throwing whatever it is. And it's exactly what you said. It's time on the water. It's time spent sometimes doing the wrong things. And that leads you into the right path. And I think it's really important for new anglers to understand that you have to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone, because you never know what that next thing might be your number one bait. And I've struggled with baits like beaver. I do not have confidence in that bait. Yet our friends, the Abels, they do really well on it. I struggled with the grenade early on, and my buddy Matt, he has so much confidence in it. And then when the mini grenade come out, that was more into what we wanted to use size wise. And now I've caught a few fish on that, and I'm gaining confidence in that. And that was, even though I didn't have success, I was willing to go back. And when I talked with Doug Wagner last week, I was like, I have to go back and try the beaver a bit more, because I didn't give it enough time. But let's face it, not every bait's going to fit for everybody. And I'm sure you've had baits that just don't fit your style as well,
For sure.
Brad.
You're not wrong there. And then the one thing that I'd say that you could learn from your experience about being frustrated, sometimes you're just better off pulling off the lake, right? Just get off the water. It's like shooting archery. I don't know if you can relate it to that.
Yep.
You shoot 2 or 3 bad arrows, hang it up for the day. Go to try it again tomorrow. You can't fish angry. And if you are fishing angry, your success rate's going to go down, hands down. So definitely something to think about. A clear mind, don't fish angry, make it fun. It's supposed to be fun. Don't forget that part of it.
You you sounded exactly like my wife there. When I would get so frustrated in the boat, she would be like, you're so upset. You're so like, you're in that, whatever that mood or that feeling is, you're not doing good. And you're right. So something David and I have learned over the past few years, it's not worth it for us to grind 8 hours out on the water. We're much better off to pick and choose our times. And last year, for example, was a super tough year everywhere. I mean, everybody can kind of, admit that. And we went up to Cedar. We went, put our boat in, went over to the island camp and visited our friends, had dinner, had a cocktail, and then we're like, okay, it's just about witching hour. And we went out and we got 3 fish that night inside a couple hours. And it was like a 48, a 44, and a 37 on a show color suet. And it was a week when guys were having a lot of trouble, and we just picked and choose our time. So we knew we were going to be effective. And I think I see it when people go on vacation trips. They come up here because, like, where I live is in the heart of everybody's bucket list. Eagle Lake is like literally, 5 minutes from my house. And I see so many people come up going to my wife's sports shop, and they're like, oh man, we've been grinding out 14-hour days every day. And, we're just nothing to show for it. And I was like, you know what? Maybe you guys should grind 2 hours in the morning, go for bass or walleye and have a nap in the afternoon, and then grind those last 3 hours out really hard, because I can almost guarantee at the end of a 14-hour grind, you're not putting the same effort in hour 12, 13, and 14 as you were in hour 1 or 2. And I get it when you go on a trip, and maybe you can talk to us about your trips with 10,000 casts, and even outside of 10,000 casts, you're going to a lot of destinations, areas. How do you look at those trips and plan it and try and be effective, and even without the filming, Brad? Because I do want to ask you about that, because like we share that same, common interest or common, background. But what's it like going on those trips for you and trying to manage, expectations versus
Sure.
reality?
Let me add a couple more things there. Like you said, take a break, take a nap, whatever it might be. I'll give you
Mhm.
two examples of two really good fishermen. Jason Summers, he's the one that created the Medusa and had Chaos Tackle originally. He told me something, and I've said this periodically on Backlash Podcast, and I've told other people this. One of the most interesting things, he fished the PMTT all the time, and he is again this year, I believe. So a lot of times when you're in a tournament scenario, you're kind of locked down just to a little small area, right? Because there's so many other anglers out there, you can't get on this spot or you can't hit this spot. So you get locked down in one spot. And I said, how do you manage that, Jason? He goes, sometimes, Brad, I just turn the key on the boat, I rip out, do a big loop, and I come right back to the same spot. And he goes, you'd be amazed at how it clears your head. You approach that spot in a whole different light. I always thought that was really interesting. I think it's really a cool concept. And that's what you're talking about, and taking a break. You don't beat the crap out of yourself. Again, it's supposed to be fun. Second of all, in 05, if anybody's seen Big Blades, Big Muskies, it was the very first video that we did. It came out in the winter of 06, but in 2005, I videotaped Jason Hammernick and Billy Beekner, two unbelievable muskie anglers, in the Minnesota Tournament Trail. And we were fishing on Mille Lacs, and I'll never forget this. So we do the launch. I can't remember, they caught 3, 4, maybe even 5 muskies that morning. And Jason goes, what do you think, Billy? And he goes, yeah, I'm ready. We went to a bar and ate burgers in the middle of a tournament. And I remember they called Paul Hartman, and they go, Paul, is it okay if we leave the boat? We're going to get a burger. And Paul's like, yeah, that's fine. So we pull into a bar. We sat there for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And when they came back out, they fished just as hard and caught another fish. So those are two great examples of making the best use of your time, right? And allowing you a little bit of freedom away from it, because when you're muskie angling, you need to pay attention, right? So back to your question, traveling around and hitting different bodies of water. In a lot of cases, it's a new body of water that I have never fished. Sometimes it's lakes that I fished 30 years ago or 25 years ago, but I hadn't looked at them forever, right? So you don't know what's really going on. The beauty of it is Chase and I's relationship works really well. Neither of us are like really early risers. And so we'll generally sleep in and then hit the water around 9 o'clock, and we'll take a midday break. A lot of times we just take a midday break. We pull off the water. There's other times when we'll fish 16 hours straight. But it all depends on what the fish are telling you too. You have to read the fish. You have to read what the environment's like. Is things going to go off? Is there weather coming? Is there a moon phase? Maybe it's sunset. Maybe it's after dark period. But you compile that information as your day progresses, and then you build off of that. And so maybe the first day you only fish 6 hours because, man, I'm just not feeling it. And I think if you relate to your body and you realize how things are going, and if your brain isn't in it, I said it with archery, you shoot 2, 3 bad arrows, quit, pull off, regroup, and start over the next day. And that's what we've always done. I think it's important to do that, because if you just allow yourself to get to that frustration point, you're gonna break. It isn't gonna work. And we've been very successful with those trips that we've taken. We've found success in all of them. I think we've had Oh, it was probably 2 seasons ago. We beat ourselves up for 3 days and we never did catch. So it happens to everybody, right? But
Mm-hmm.
we didn't change either. So this isn't working, but we're going to do it for 3 straight days. That's stupid. I mean, why would you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again if it isn't working? You want success. We should have changed things up. We realized that. We just hung it up. Let's take a couple-day break and we'll hit it again.
Yeah, there's so much you just said there, and the the idea of taking that break, or when you don't feel it. Some days when we get out on the water, and for our personal fishing, it's different when you're guiding, right? Like you're locked into that day. You gotta grind it out. You gotta figure something out. But a couple things for me stick out when you're kind of talking about that, Brad, and it's early on, Dave and I, if we give ourselves 6 hours on the water, we're fishing right till sunset, like come hell or high water. But over the course of time and seeing that the conditions were whatever they were and it wasn't going to work, that now we fish a couple hours and we'll just look at each other, and even without saying it, because when you fish with a partner that you get to know, we just look at each other and we're like, yeah, this is not happening today. Like we might grind one out, but our time is better suited doing something else. Go spend time with the wife and kids, or go back to the cabin for a swim, whatever it is. So we've grown up, if that's the right term there, that some days are just not going to work. And I've told this story before, that I think it was 2019. Dave and I are not trollers. We dabble. And in 2019, I was out guiding on this lake on the Saturday or the Sunday, got a couple fish. All the fish were pushed up on the shallow rocks. And Dave and I went out on the Monday, which must have been a holiday, fished all morning. Conditions were right. We had a moon. We had like all the things that you would think. And there wasn't a fish left on the rocks anywhere. We tried the weeds, not much for weeds on this lake. And we fished for 2.5 hours and we hadn't even seen a sniff of a fish. And I know that sounds horrible because a lot of people go days and days, but on your home bodies of water, you're like, something's got to show, and nothing. And I was like, well, let's just head her over to our buddy Steve's camp and we'll go have a beer with him for lunch or whatever. And the wife had packed some pizza up. I pop open the pizza and I was like, well, let's have a piece of pizza. I'll just throw a trolling bait on while we idle back. And within 45 minutes, we got 4 fish trolling, and all the fish had pushed out to the basin. And we didn't see it until we seen it. And it was one of those things that we go back to so many times. It's like, okay, we haven't seen them where we expect. We haven't seen them on the B spots, the C spots, or you go down the list and it's like, okay, what did we learn in 2019? Let's go check that last spot. And before I turn it back to you, I just this is kind of a funny story. We were on the same body of water, and it was probably a few years before that. And you guys have a color, and I don't know what it is. It's kind of a anodized pink and an anodized greeny, yellowy. It's very
Hot
bright, very
chartreuse.
obnoxious. Hot chartreuse. Okay, well, don't take any offense, and Carrie, don't take a voodoo doll out and get me in the back here. We look at that thing and Dave's like, "Oh my god, this thing looks like dog puke." He's like, "What is this?" He clips it on a day, and I shit you not, Brad, we had not seen a fish, and within like 4 casts, Dave has 2, and we're like, "What? Why?" There's no reason why that bait out of any other bait that we have. So if there's one bait that Dave always has in his box, and it's one of those things, like it's like, I dare you to pull that bait out, and it saved the day. I mean, it literally saved the day. But when you're going on those trips and you're filming, there's pressure. Obviously, you guys are trying to make something happen. It's a little different for us because if it happens, it happens. I'm not under a time crunch to produce. But when you go into those trips, and this leads me to another question from our Patreon, and I'm going to just bring it up here. I'm interested to learn how he motivates himself and clients when you go days or weeks without a catch and you're a victim of terrible fishing conditions. And this is from another one of my buddies, Ed, who I'll be fishing with right around opener up here. He normally comes later in the season, but his daughter is having a child. So he's like, I can't miss that. But when you go on these trips specifically, Brad, and you're dealt the worst hand possible, what's outside of taking a break or getting off the water, how do you manage those those expectations?
Yeah, it gets challenging. There's no question about it. The first thing you do is you put hot sauce on the end of the barrel so you keep it out of your mouth, right? That works pretty good. Musky fishing is challenging. I'll be honest, I'm pretty fortunate with the bodies of water that we have in this area. It's hard to go more than 3 days without catching. It really is. And one of the things, you mentioned the hot chartreuse as a color. The reason that color came about was for night fishing, honestly. We've seen this back on Mille Lacs in the early days. Pinks and chartreuses worked really good after dark. And so we combined those two colors. That's one of the things that you can do. If you're experiencing all this struggle, now Eagle's a little bit different because you can't night fish out there, but night fishing can be the time that you need to get out there, right? If you're struggling through 2-3 days and you're just not putting it together, try going out and doing the same thing after dark. And a lot of times that'll break that code. Staying positive. I mean, literally especially when you're traveling, it can be super frustrating. I think for a lot of these people, how do I say this without offending anybody? But honestly, I mean, I don't guide like I once did. I did plenty of that. And it isn't that I don't enjoy it. I do enjoy it. But the one thing that I never liked about it was I'm on somebody else's schedule. I talked to you yesterday, Glenn. We're going to meet at 7 a.m. today, right? So I'll be in the shop working and oh crap, I gotta go fish, but I would tell everybody, hire a guide. If you're going to some place for a week, hire a guide. It's going to cut your learning curve so much. If you're a weekend warrior, you had success this weekend, next weekend it's a whole different ballgame. In that week period, things change. And can you luck back into it? Did the fish not move? Potentially. But a lot of times, in a lot of cases, it's totally different. So you have to approach things differently. How long do you put in before you make those changes, right? If I showed up at a body of water and I struggled all day and maybe I seen one fish. Okay, well, why was that fish there? We put 8 hours in and we seen one fish. Why was that fish there and we didn't see anything else? Well, maybe the boat's a little too close to the structure. Maybe you're too far away from the structure. Maybe the fish are on the inside of the weed line. You got to start identifying some of those things to put those pieces of the puzzle together. And that takes time. And so you just need to break that down into segments of time until you start locating and contacting fish. And it's going to change your whole deal. You can't dead end yourself by trying one thing and just sticking to it. Why I said it earlier, we did it for 3 days. We did this trolling bite that I just had tons of confidence in. We went 3 days without catching. Talk about frustrating. We had a 4th day scheduled. We canceled it. Let's just regroup. This is dumb. But when you're in a time constraint, you're on a trip or something like that, and you need to make it work, well, guess what? You got to bear down and start putting those pieces of the puzzle together. It's just plain and simple. If it isn't working on the 20-foot break line, casting the outside of the weeds, go inside. Find out what's going on inside. If they're not there, you hit on it. You said, we're going to troll a little bit and just see what happens. Boom, you caught 4 fish. It's that simple, but we complicate it. Us as anglers complicate it every time. It's our own fault. It's our own demise. So,
yeah, I couldn't agree. And Ed comes back with too many times we end up fishing memories rather than productive spots. Yep. And I see so many people that come up to Northwestern Ontario and they they want to do it on their own. They want to conquer Eagle
For sure.
Lake. They want to conquer Cedar or Lake of the Woods or Sewell, whatever one it is. And I admire that. But I also know that many, many great anglers come up here and leave with their tail between their legs. And one of my buddies here, Mitch, is on here. Actually, he just commented. He's like, "Great point, Ed." And Mitch fished with me a couple of years ago, and we didn't catch one that day. But one of the spots we were on, he went back a day later, and I was like, "Yeah, this spot, it's got a lot going on. Main Lake Point, Deep Basin." He went back a week or a few days later and got a 48 on that spot by learning and picking up some stuff from a guide. And another story that I would give, and actually one of my buddies, Mark, who's coming up this summer from Chicago, hasn't been here for a few years. He was up here a few years ago and stayed at Manitowoc Lodge on Peralt Lake. And Peralt's just a great lake. A lot of people are scared of it. It's semi-clear water, deep basin, doesn't have a lot of quote unquote classic musky structure unless you look. But it's one of our favorite lakes in the area. If you go to Cedar, it's connected by river and everybody fishes Cedar because it's the popular one. We always go north and go into Peralt. Mark is up there staying at Manitowoc Lodge. Him and his buddies, they've never been there. I give them a few pointers, just kind of here's a picture of a map. Try here, try here. I think they got one fish on the week or something like that. And the day that I went up there and guided for another camp, we got 3, and Mark didn't even really see a fish that day. And that's not just, tooting my own horn, but that's me having some more experience on that lake and knowing for those conditions that time of year where to go and at least get started going back on your memory and your logs of it. And if that would have been tough for me, I would have been quick to transition into something else. And I think that's so important to know when to transition. And countless articles have been wrote about when do you switch from a bucktail to a swim bait? When do you switch from this to that? And there's no right or wrong answer. But for you, Brad, on the water, seat of your pants, you're fishing, whatever lake it is, and all of a sudden you're just not feeling it. And I suspect for a lot of anglers that have time and you get to that point where you're just like, I'm just not feeling this. It's time to switch. What is that for you? What's that feel like for you, Brad?
Well, it might be a bait thing, right? So say I'm throwing blades and we're not getting fish to move. Well, guess what? Usually there's somebody else in the boat with you, right? I mean, I don't solo fish like I once did. So a start-stop type bait, pull pause, can make all the difference in the world, right? So there's just so many different factors. I guess if I was sitting here thinking about all the different things that you could do, I kind of touched on it, inside, outside. Is that what you're asking, Glenn, or were you asking more on a personal level, how I react to it?
Well, yeah, you're reactionary on the water. When it's tough and you get that, it's like that extra sense of I'm just not feeling either this bait or this, the way we're attacking the structure. I like that you're bringing up that inside out. I think that's something that's so overlooked, especially up here on these shield lakes. I know for you guys, it's something that you do on those big weed flats, but typically on shield lakes, like your weeds go almost all the way to shore in most cases. But I'll just say one thing. A lot of times, if we're not seeing those fish on the outside of the weeds, we'll go till the trolling motor's digging sand on the inside. And a lot of times we can contact fish. So yeah, like how do you make those decisions on the water? Like, is it just by the seat of your pants, or is it, relying on some memory or some, what tells you when you got to change something?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just gut instinct. I truly do. And I know that comes from experience as well, right? So different things happen. Just this week on the podcast on Backlash podcast, I talked about an example. And Carrie she was on the podcast and she was kind of ripping on me that I don't keep records. If you do keep records, it definitely can dig you out of a hole. There's no question. My joke was, I mean, if you're struggling, not catching fish, guess what? Go to the restaurant, order a fish sandwich, get a little blood in your, or a little fish in your blood. And Hammernick and I used to do that all the time together. Like, he would be struggling and I wasn't. He'd get a fish sandwich and he'd get out and catch one almost instantly. And it's a mindset thing, right? But I rely on gut instinct. And in a lot of cases, there's times when I can go back on some history and go, man, this day is setting up just like it set up in 2009. I'm going to go out and do this after we get done with lunch or after the sun goes down. I'm going to go do this. And it works. So history, time on the water, and gut instinct. I mean, that's truly the way I look at it. And believe me, a lot of times that isn't good enough. So you really got to come out of your shell, and you got to cut this into pieces. And I've said it forever. It's a puzzle. Start with one piece and start building off of that piece. That's really what it boils down to. And I don't care how good you are, you know. I know some people. Billy Beekner is one that blows my mind. If I called him right now and said, hey, do you remember that fish we caught in 2007 and blah, blah, blah? And he'd go, oh, yeah, we were on this spot. We were throwing this bait and we were working it like this. I can't do that. I could do it better with fishing than I can probably the rest of my personal life. But I don't have that kind of memory. Mine's pretty short. So I a lot of times rely on gut instinct more than anything.
Well, the one thing that has helped me the last few years is I have a few of your baits sitting here, but they're sitting on my binder where I keep all my notes from all of my files from the GoPros. So every day I list them in, I put the water temp, the air temp, the wind, any kind of conditions, the moon. And early on, it was just Glenn's musky, Dave's musky, Kyla's musky. If it was a tiger, sometimes I'd put 43 inch or just to keep track, because sometimes it's 6, 8, 10 months before you go back to edit those files. And a lot of times when I would go back, I have no idea what we caught this on. Like, I actually have to go through it because a lot of times we would want to add some underwater footage with it. And now I put caught on, double cowgirl, caught on this. If it's something that I know
Right.
I'm going to need some help with. So I'm like you. I think catching a number of fish is a blessing. Like, let's face it, you've caught so many fish in your life that you're not going to remember every single one, even by looking at a photograph. Some you will, some you won't. For the majority of the listeners and the majority of the people buying their first Musky Mayhem bait, every fish is going to be that memory, that first, it's the most important thing in their fishing journey. And I do think that it's very important for people as they're getting into it to try and keep track of at least something, because it's a lot easier to dig into your brain when you've caught 100, 150 fish last year, or whatever the number is. When you've only caught 1 to 4 last season, it's a lot different to look back and say, well, today the sky's like this, and what did I do last year? Well, it was a crapshoot last year. So I do think, even just with the pictures we have on our phone, you can put a little note to it, like, hey, I caught this on a showgirl. The wind was from the west. The moon was here. That's something that will help the beginner start to build, that little Rolodex of information. And I think that is really cool. I want to change kind of
I want to
speed
do
here a
one
little
thing
bit,
there,
Brad.
that it's kind of funny
Okay.
because I just talked about this earlier this week. I stumbled upon something that I did when I first initially started musky fishing, and that was I had a Polaroid camera in the boat. The beauty of a Polaroid camera is the little white tab on the bottom. You could take a Sharpie and write all that information that you're talking about. And something that Chase Gibson kind of shared with me a year or two ago, he said, Brad, he goes, people take logbooks and blah, blah, blah. What he does, you take a picture of you holding the fish, then take a picture of your GPS where your water temp's on there, your the depth is on there, the spot's on there. And if you look at the fish picture, you can tell, was it sunny? Was it cloudy? Was it windy? Was it calm? That'll tell you a bunch of information. And if that picture is right after the picture of the fish, guess what? You have all the information right there, even dated. So that can be a tool.
Yeah.
And it's real simple to scroll through your photos. July 7th of 99, boom, here's a fish, so that might help some of them too. So I wanted to bring that up before we switch gears. But
that's actually really good advice. And I think, again, for people like yourself and Chase and even myself, excuse me, who hasn't caught as many fish as you, it's easy to take a little bit more time when you get a fish because you're not as excited. Again, going back to new anglers, I remember what it was like to, like, oh my God, we got a muskie in the net. Like, this is just amazing. And that 3 minutes of your life just goes by so fast. You want the perfect picture, you want this, and then afterwards you look at your pictures like, oh, these all suck, and I don't remember what I caught it. I know how fast that happens, and I think it's easy to tell people what to do. It's a lot harder when you're in that position. It's like trying to teach somebody how to do a proper figure eight. You can show them on the dock or at the side of the boat a million times until they have a 4-foot angry muskie chasing. It's like all
Yep.
bets are off, right? Like, we know that. So I do like that advice. I think that's a great, easy way to capture that moment and then capture that information. So yeah, thanks for that. Like, that's definitely like a plus tip right there. But going back to your gut feeling, it reminded me, going back to the early days of Musky Mayhem tackle, and I would feel remiss if I didn't ask you this. When I talked to Brad Rue, I was like, Brad, what did it feel like when the inevitable imitations came up? And no bait has been copied more in history, I'm sure, than the double cowgirl. What was that like for you guys? Obviously, from what I understand, there was no patent put on it, and let's face it, patent laws being what they are, you don't have to change much to be legal. But from your perspective, over those first couple of years, watching everybody come out with this double 10, big bladed flash of boo bait, what was that like from your perspective? And did you take some satisfaction in basically creating a new segment of bait? It's still going strong today. I mean, I hear you talk about it a lot, not to kind of change the subject on it, but you talk a lot about people starting to kind of downsize on baits, and I do want to talk about that. But what was that like for you watching all these other companies come out with effectively your bait?
Honestly, I touched upon it a little bit earlier, where we didn't have time. We were looking windshield, never in the rearview mirror, right? And so time-wise, I think you touched on it. Patents, 7% change is all it takes. So they changed the bead size on a bucktail. They're legal. I mean, you could go fight it in court. It isn't worth getting a patent on a bait. It really, truly isn't. You'd have to have something very unique. We never really had time to really digest what was actually taking place. I think the bitter side to it, if I could say one thing about knockoff baits, was when people lied to us. And I would be talking to you right now, Glenn, and no, we're never going to do that. We're never going to knock you off. And some of them were very large corporations that came and told us, we'll never knock you off. This is really cool. 3 months later, they've knocked us off. It was pretty amazing. But there was some bittersweet in that whole deal too, because when Rapala did it with Blue Fox, I'll never forget it. We're at the Minnesota show, and they are selling 2 for $15. Our booth is plumb full, and their booth is totally empty, right? And I think the neat thing about muskie fishing has been the loyalty. There's always been a loyalty to the brands that created themselves and were early in this deal and created new concepts of baits. You touched upon Red October. I believe they started in 2005, the same year we started. Supernatural started in 2005. He's been knocked off as well. I really think it's super important. And if you come out with a new bait tomorrow, you need to remember you have a short period of time to build build that background and that support group behind you, and look out the windshield. Don't look behind you. Just keep going forward. And that's what we really tried to do. I just, the neat thing about going to shows, if you go to a muskie show, you get to meet the people that are actually making these baits, right? And that's a unique thing in the muskie world as well. If you're in the bass or walleye world, crappie world, doesn't matter. A lot of that stuff is from China. And we're seeing some of that in the muskie world too. We're seeing a lot of companies showing up that are getting their stuff built in China. And it's a little frustrating to me, to be honest with you, just in the fact that this community of muskie anglers have always been very loyal to the U.S. built. They build a relationship with the manufacturer at the shows. And I think there's less people going to shows today when I think there should be more. Come and meet us. Let's talk. Build a relationship with that manufacturer and get to know them, because we want to get to know you. I think it's really important that we get to know you. And I think that's healthy, and I think it's fun. And we want to share with your success. I mean, you catch something on our baits, we want to see a picture. Show it to us. I mean, let's hear your story. I think it's invaluable. It really is. It's what keeps you getting up every day.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's a product of our younger generation, the short attention span with, everybody knows that. And I think that it's twofold. We need younger, newer anglers to get into the sport, because the quote unquote old guard are getting older and they're going to slowly leave the sport. And if we don't have people coming in to take their place, it's slowly going to, fall apart. And I touched on it earlier. It's a big ask to ask somebody to come into muskie fishing. It's probably the most expensive, freshwater fish you can fish for. It's also the coolest. I mean, there's that. Nobody gets all excited when you post a picture of a crappie, but you put a 51-inch muskie or a 45-inch tagger and you get people's attention. So, there's that side of it. But I do think that even when I talk to friends that are lodge owners up here, and the same family's been coming for 35, 40 years, and now, grandpa's maybe not there and dad's in his late 60s, early 70s, and the son is, 40, and he's already on the fence on, I don't know if I'm going to come back to this lodge. I might go somewhere else. Well, now the grandson is like, yeah, I'm going somewhere different every year, because there's no loyalty left. And it's a tough one to try and fix. I see it with people wanting to try every single lure, and I'm a horrible example of this, because the nature of what we do with our channel, we try so many different things and we try to share that with people, but we naturally obviously gravitate towards certain companies. And just personally, my feeling over the past few years is that I love working with these, basement builders and the boutique builders, and helping them gain some success. But there's just something solid about these cornerstone companies, which, Mayhem is. It's one of those cornerstone companies. And the further I get in my journey, the more I see the value in, working with those foundational companies. And when I talked to Steve Hiding, he said something that really stuck with me. And I asked him, you've been with MEPS for so long. And I'm like, was there ever a desire to do something different? And he's like, no, I just had a really good relationship there. And I think that's really important to understand every bait you already have in your tackle box before you try something new. And that's not a knock on that he uses MEPS and not Musky Mayhem, but I think there's there's a lot of value in that comment, that sometimes we get caught up just thinking that the shiny new thing across the street is going to be, the ticket. And you guys you've almost bucked that trend. Like I said earlier, you're not chasing trends, although you guys have come up with your own, in the trigger and then the detonator and the grenade. And this year coming up with the single girl flash, with which I have here. And I do want to tell a quick story about this one, but how have you guys navigated that and just held true without feeling like you needed to do something extravagant or over the top to try and compete? Obviously, like you guys you're from what you're saying, you're focused on, that path ahead. And I do think that's really important, because I do see a lot of newer bait builders. They might be looking ahead, but they got one eye over their shoulder, wondering who's coming to get them.
Yeah, so I'll take this from Jeff Schulte from Fish Bumper. He said it a couple of years ago. I think it was on a TV show. I don't remember, but he called them spaghetti builders. You make some spaghetti, you throw it against the wall, and if it sticks, great. If it doesn't, throw it out. And I touched on it earlier. You need to make a bait that every person can throw, and nobody's going to have problems with it. And they work. And I think the evolution of creating and R&Ding a new product, it takes time. Sometimes it takes 3 years. I mean, the grenade really started from something that I did with Larry Dahlberg, man, at least 15 years ago, maybe 18 years ago. He came up here and he had, I think he called it the Double Trouble. It had that same lead head, or similar to that lead head, and it had antennas coming off of it with 2 blades on it. And he showed me something. He showed me something really crazy that I still struggle with today, because I've tried it. He brought a fish to the boat. They were being really lazy. He hit the button, free-falled the bait, turned the handle. I got it. And he did it 2 or 3 times in one day, showing me that muskies they'll follow a bait down, obviously. And it was very unique. So we had that bait. I played with it for many years. And the problem with it is I didn't think the consumer would enjoy it. And the reason I didn't think they'd enjoy it is because those 2 little blades on the top sometimes would spin, sometimes they wouldn't. And that's what created the grenade. And I threw the grenade 2 or 3 seasons before we brought it to the public. And it was small tweaks, but that's what makes the difference. Definitely something to consider and think about. And I think people go to the shows, or they see something on social media and they're like, I got to get that bait. I got to get that bait. And they show up there and they buy all this new product. How much of it gets used? I think people go back to the staple baits. I mean, Musky Innovations is a great part of that. Red October is a great part of that. Supernatural is a great part of that. And being creative is great, but those staple baits, and it goes back to our conversation on confidence. Having confidence in what you're using is a big key to that too. So I'm not saying all new baits are bad by any means, because believe me, if you came to my place, you would see I've got tons of new stuff as well. I'm always looking for the next new thing too. But the point being is that if you have confidence and you have products that catch fish, you're going to fish them differently than if you pulled something brand new out and threw it 10 times and I don't know. Maybe you throw it 100 times. Maybe you throw it for 18 hours. But my point is that you have to build off of that confidence somehow with every bait that you're going to use. And it starts with a fish for sure. Or maybe it's something that you just really like to see in the water and you believe in it right away. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's important. But just be careful, because there's a lot of manufacturers out there, whether they're garage builders or bigger companies. They're making something right now that's going to go to the show next year. And does it have any success behind it? Maybe, maybe not. So beware of that, and I think it's important. Mm-hmm. And the staple baits will always have their place.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And a few years ago, I had a friend of mine out. We were on Cedar, and he was using a double Cowgirl. And the one I showed here earlier, this gold with cranberry, he was using like this hollow cranberry color, and I thought it was like a hollow black. I wasn't sure, and it had a brass and a smoke, or a brass and a black blade. And this year, when I did I started a video and I talked about smaller baits, just the underused kind of bucktails in the industry. And you guys had just launched the single girl flash. And one of the comments was like, you guys got to try this new single girl flash. And I was like, well, I'm going to go to the show. I'll talk to Brad, see if I can get one. So I went into the booth, talked to Brad, got him away from people for a few minutes. And I was like, Brad, here's my story. One of my clients had something very similar to this, but it wasn't that cranberry and gold like that. It was something different. And you're like, oh, I think it was like a cranberry, and I think you called this motor oil. And I had your guys build this right in the booth. And this is the new single girl flash. It's got that little sleeve in there, like the trigger. I'm looking forward to this. The other bait I picked up was the rabid squirrel. And off air, I told Brad that back in the day, I had one of these original ones, and I don't know whatever happened to it. I don't know if it was exactly this. It looked like this. I'm assuming it was one of the originals. So I wanted to pick up another rabid squirrel. And Brad, can you talk to us the difference between something like this rabid squirrel and the single girl flash, and where I should use this a little bit differently going into this season, and where one might excel versus the other?
Well, one of the first things is how much water it's going to move, right? And so you look at that number 9 Indiana blade on the single girl flash, it's going to push a bunch more water. That's a proven blade. It's the same blade that's been used on the Eagle Tails for, I could be wrong, but I think it's around 43 years now. Huge success. And we started with the single girl, which is a marabou with flashabou. They have a 3/4 ounce weight on them, so you can throw them like a rocket. They'll just fly through the air like none other. They're easy to work. They're easy to retrieve. And you can put a lot of speed on them, but yet they're still pushing a lot of water with that big number 9 Indiana. So that's where that kind of shines. The rabid squirrel is a bait that I primarily use in the fall. So you get those first cold fronts, the fish kind of push shallow, and it's just such an effective bait. They don't look like much, and it's amazing to me how many people come to the booth and they're looking for the rabid squirrels or even the rabid girls. So we make a version of that in flashabou as well. And it's funny, it seems like everybody, if there's flashabou on a bait, they elevate to a double blade. And if it's a hair bait, they go single blade. I don't know what that is. And there's reason for that in my mind, but I don't know that the consumer is looking at it in the same realm. Flashabou breathes really well. It pulsates in the water. It doesn't want to touch itself when it's underwater. Double blades create a vacuum, and that vacuum, that vortex behind it, makes that skirt move. When you go to a single blade, it lays down more tight. So that's something to consider. But honestly, the fish don't care if that flashabou is dancing that much, right? It's more about that color. And flashabou makes a different noise than hair does in the water. Marabou makes a different noise. That flashabou, when it's touching each other, it's plastic. It's mylar plastic. So it does have a noise to it. It's probably so subtle we can't hear it, but I think fish can hone in on some of that. And they look natural in the water. But back to your original question, you can't work either of those baits wrong. If you're fishing rocks, great. Put some heat on it. And there's times when fish want to go slow. I've said it 1,000 times, and I'll say it again today.
Yeah.
Does the fat man run to the refrigerator, or does he walk? And I really, truly believe in a lot of cases, especially if you're in a body of water where it has a ton of forage, those big fish are lazy. They don't have to work that hard to eat. So a slower presentation will work just fine. And keep that in mind. I mean, Jim Sarek, in the early days of the Cowgirl, told everybody in Musky Hunter on his TV show, as well as in the magazine, that you need to burn a double cowgirl. And I'm here at home going like this, just barely reeling, creeping it, right? So it's based off of, in my opinion, the forage base of the lake. And so speed is a huge factor. There's times when you can't go fast enough. And if you're in a low forage-based lake, the fastest bait's going to catch the biggest fish, because those big fish are going to push the other fish out of the way and eat the bait. It's the opposite if it's full. If they've got tons of forage, they're going to be lazy, fat, and slow. So slow down your presentation. And that just comes from time. But both of those baits are capable of both of those things. The rabbit squirrel's a little lighter. It's an awesome bait for burning. The single blade is so easy. And if you're fishing some shallow weeds, that first beginning of the first cold fronts, those fish push shallow, it's a go-to bait for sure, especially when you're trying to get a reaction bite where you're trying to burn it.
When I looked at this, Brad, the first thing I thought of is the Muntz angling weedless trebles, throwing one on the back and even downsizing this front hook slightly with a weedless treble. And we could get this almost anywhere you could put a spinner bait. And it's just that small profile, but yet it's still a big enough bait. That's what I seen in it right away. I was like, there's areas where I know I could use this. And it was just one of those ones that I had in the past that I was like, I got to definitely pick one up. One other bait that you guys make that I don't think gets talked about near enough, and it was probably one of my favorite baits that you guys make, is the electric bunny. And my wife's shop sells an absolute shit ton of those things. And it's one that you almost never hear really talking about or spoken about in public. You talk to guides and fishermen, it's like, oh yeah, I got this on the rabbit squirrel, or this color's my favorite. My favorite's like that white and black kind of almost skunky looking with the white blade or a silver blade. And it just works on so much of our water, our clearer water up here. But talk about that bait a little bit, because I do think that might be one of your like hidden gems inside your lineup.
Yeah, I think what it amounts to, Glenn, is it's a small little bundle, right? With big blades. It's number 9 blades, Magnum 9s on it. So again, that's a marabou bait with a little tuft of flash boo at the bottom. It's heavy. It's 3/4 ounce weight. It's a great burning bait, but it's small. It's really short, but it's just got the big blades on it. So you're moving a ton of water with that bait as well, but it's a small package still. So it's a really cool, unique bait that that works very, very well. I mean, it's based off the junior Cowgirl, but it's a little shorter and it's got marabou. So it's a different kind of package. And I'll be honest with you, whether it be the single girl flash, or the electric bunny, those are some of my go-tos when I'm on Shield Lakes for sure.
We did a video a few years ago where we took flash baits versus marabou baits, and obviously marabou rides a little bit different in the water column, moves the water a little bit different, and the electric bunny was one that didn't really fit one or the other. Like, it clearly is like a hybrid kind of bait, but it's one that I don't think people really talk about. And you get this weird thing with bucktail guys. It's like, I'm a marabou guy or I'm a flashabou guy. And it's one of those things, right? We've clearly found use for the electric bunny, and it's one of the ones that we will rely on in certain situations. But that short frame fits exactly what we like up here. And when we get a year where we have a lot of weeds up here and you're still trying to use bucktails, we generally will take a bucktail. Well, this is a bad example, but like your single girl flash has no top hook. We want to run just a single treble. So like this rabbit squirrel, we would remove that top hook and just run one hook, short frame. And a few years ago, we went to the Musky Mayhem booth in Minnesota, and we asked Brad, we're like, hey, the detonator is really cool, but could we shorten this up, one skirt, one treble? He's like, yeah, absolutely, we can do this. So they built Dave and I a couple, and I remember I sent you some underwater stills or video of it, and you're like, yeah, that's just going to get better with use. And we've thrown it a lot. I haven't caught on it, but it's one of those baits. It's I would see it as like a situational bait, just with those big blades. And it's one I really should use a little bit more, but that short frame, those big blades, like, you're moving a ton of water, a ton of thump in that bait. And again, it's one of those ones we probably should rely on more when we do have those seasons where we get a lot of weed growth, because I think you can still, get a bait like that through a lot of slop. And again, going back to going to the shows and talking to these builders at the show, you can go there and talk to Brad and Carrie and be like, "Hey, I like this bait, but can we do it something different?" And there's a good chance like you're going to get it there where, again, going back to like the China baits, you're not going to get that. So I just think there is something really cool about going to a show and seeing, touching, feeling the baits, and then talking, to the builders. That's a big part of what it is that we do.
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. I mean, you could do that right online. If you go to muskymayhemtackle.com, we have a custom section, and there's a notes area there. So Jason Hammernick used to take the supermodels, and he'd call it the shorty supermodel. Team Rhino actually sells them on their website, but we will take spacers out and shorten up your supermodel. We can do that with a detonator. We can do that with a lot of different baits. So you can make a small bundle with big blades if you want. And if you write that in your notes or email us, we can probably do it. The shows are a great time for that because we have every component there. We can make those changes right there. Definitely one of the unique parts is not only talking to the manufacturers, but having the opportunity to talk to guides that maybe won't share with you during the season because they don't want to give up everything that they're doing. Maybe if you hire them, you'll get more information. But my point is that during that showtime, you have the opportunity to discuss all kinds of topics with different people and pick their brains, whether it's a guide, a weekend warrior, or if it's a manufacturer. They're all available there, and almost everybody is willing to talk at that point.
Yeah, no, that's the fun part for us going down to the shows is getting to see guys like you. It's hard to get into a detailed conversation, but you certainly get, you get to see everybody there, and you get to talk to people, and it's one of those interesting times where, like you say, everybody's on the same playing field. Nobody's got 40 fish already this year, or 30 fish, and it's everybody's starting at, ground zero, and everybody's willing to talk. So I highly recommend, everybody at least checking out a show that's close to you, because I do think they're still a unique way to get out and visit and see people. And unfortunately, if people don't keep going, these shows are gonna, slowly die off, and that is unfortunate. My wife's seen that with her shop, where some of her buying shows are starting to go virtual coming out of COVID, and it is just not the same, right? So as we wrap this one up, Brad, what's left for Brad and Carrie with Musky Mayhem Tackle? Where do you guys go from here? Is this going to become Mika's business when you retire again from your retirement job? What keeps you motivated, and where do you guys go from here?
Well, I said it earlier, the motivation is having people share with us, whether that's at shows or through an email or a phone call, a message on Instagram. Listening to people having success. I mean, that's huge. It really feels good. If you're a manufacturer and you have people reaching out to you, there's nothing better. It truly is. That's one thing that kind of greases the wheels, if you will. We have a plethora of ideas, and we're working on some concept stuff right now, and we'll continue on that. And we started with it last year a little bit. So hopefully some of that stuff comes out, and if it's not ready, we'll wait another year. Mika has no interest in taking over the business. So I don't know. Does that end up in a sale of some sort at some point, potentially? I don't know. I've always told Carrie it'd be kind of cool just to say, hey, in 2 months, Musky Mayhem's closing, and we're done, But honestly, I think the better route is to sell at some point. I mean, that's the future, I'd say. But in the meantime, we're not done. We're going to continue working and growing. And one of the challenges that I would say becomes a huge challenge for us is being creative when you're so busy. When you're working every day and you're just nose to the grindstone, it's hard to be creative. And that's been a challenge for us. I'll be honest with you. But the one thing that I will never do is knock off somebody else. I don't want to follow somebody else's footsteps. And so being creative and coming up with new concepts becomes challenging as well. But I think it's important that we write our own story versus somebody else's.
Well, I respect that. One of the companies that I dealt with, they couldn't get their hands on number 13 blades, and they did what they called raid the supermodels, and they would get people to buy supermodels so they could raid the blades off of it. And I think everybody kind of knows who I'm talking about here. And they would do something unique with it, but it was still using, you know, your blades. And it was one thing that just never really sat super well with me. It's unfortunate that, you know, sometimes imitation is the best form of flattery, and that sometimes doesn't feel good. I don't know how, you know, guys like yourself and Brad Rude, you know, deal with that on a daily basis, because that does have to be tough. But I like that companies like yours, Brad, that you guys are looking ahead to, you know, to something different. And, you know, nobody's come out with anything that looks like the grenade or does anything like the grenade. And that would have been a really easy one to just basically copy in some form or fashion. And, you know, truth be told, I've messed around at home here with like an angry dragon head and tried to do something where it's slightly different and, you know, slightly different. And it just doesn't work as good as the mini grenade. So, you know, it sometimes you just have to stick with what works. But I want to ask you a question about an article that you wrote for Musky Hunter. I'm gonna guess it was before COVID. It was not long after Greg and Tony took over, and it was about trolling open water. There's a picture of you and Mika, and she was just like a young child. And I remember at the time, and I actually went out to our cabin to look for this magazine. I couldn't find it. And I text Greg today. I'm like, are these still online? He's like, no. And I was like, oh, you suck, Greg. I wanted this article. But you talked about trolling early season in the basin, chasing that bait fish and these fish. And we I remember I went on Ugly Pike podcast at the time. I said, I just read this article by Brad Hoppe. Dave and I want to try and incorporate some of this. We didn't do it trolling. We started casting some of that open water. And guys like Herbie have been talking about, you know, moving away from structure on Eagle for years, Cal Ritchie. And we've really adopted that. And it's really become something that we've, I guess, kind of been known for, is that fishing deep, fishing off a structure. I don't know if you were ahead of your time in that article, because I think that was happening a lot. But in today's world where everyone's like, oh, if you're fishing out in the open water, you got to be sniping fish. And I just don't think that's true. But going back to like that article or that time frame, Brad, how revolutionary was that? Was that something that was happening on a lot of those lakes in Minnesota?
I'll be honest. It's kind of wild. I mean, I've been doing it for 25 years, where we were fishing open water. I mean, we've always known about those open water fish, right? I mean, there's no secret to that. But we learned a bunch over the years. And then when Greg started staying with me, I don't know, 03, 05, somewhere in there, started staying here at the house. And there was another young guy that was here out of my area. And before he was guiding, he had gotten some DWIs, so he couldn't drive. So his grandpa would drop him off every morning at the lake. He was stuck on the lake until 10 o'clock at night when grandpa came back with the boat and trailer and loaded him up. And he had a 9.9 or a 15 horse motor on this boat. And so if he was going to go from point A to point B, guess what? You might as well troll, kind of like you saying, hey, let's go over to the neighbor's house over here and hang out. Let's just troll while we eat this pizza, right? Same exact thing. And so he would go from point A to point B across open water, and he'd throw a bait out. Well, he started putting some pieces of that puzzle together and started having success. There was also an older gentleman, I think he was Musky Inker number 6, that lived here in my area, and he printed Musky Ink magazines for free for, I don't even know, 20, 25 years. Great dude. His name was Al Scar. He's passed away probably 10 years ago, or maybe even better. But Al was a great dude, and I used to talk to him at the Access every day. And I watched him. He did a lot of open water trolling, and it sparked my interest. And I'm talking 30 years ago. So I started trying it. We're going to get out there and we're going to start trying to put this together. And it's really wild. So over a period of years, I'd drop a waypoint for every fish I caught in the open water. And the next year, those waypoints grew. And then all of a sudden I had more waypoints, and countless fish were caught on each one of those waypoints. No bottom change per se on some of the spots. Some spots you would start to put together transitions where mud and sand came together. But otherwise, sometimes it might have been the deepest hole in that body of water. It might have been something adjacent to a point that came out way off ashore. But you start putting together all these waypoints, and over a period of years, you would look at my screen and go, what in the world? This is crazy. Well, once you start getting some of those waypoints, you could go back and cast those areas and have success as well. But what we learned, and I would say we started really learning this because when I was younger in the sport, trolling was not something that I wanted to do a ton of. As I've gotten older, trolling kind of feels nice now and then. The sore back or shoulder or whatever, trolling kind of can ease some of that pain for a day or two. So, and as your clients age too, I found myself doing more trolling just based off of my clientele couldn't cast, 12, 16 hours a day. So you start incorporating it. And I think, again, it's another piece to that puzzle. You start learning some more pieces to the puzzle. And then once you have some success and you taste it, you want to grow off of that and learn more. The component that I learned is that once the thermocline started developing, we shut it down. Because what we would see is that I think these fish would go deeper in the water column, and you'd put a fish in a bag and you'd watch it just start swelling. The belly would just start filling with air, and you would have troubles releasing these fish. So, the open water fish have always been something. I mean, look at St. Clair, look at St. Lawrence, look at a lot of these, Georgian Bay. Throughout the whole Musky region, there's people that do this kind of fishing, right? We don't see it so much in the Midwest, or maybe even in Canada, in parts of Canada, I should say, because we're structure oriented, right? But there is a plethora of fish that spend a lot of time in that open water, but you have to be cautious of that. And I think that's where the sniping side comes in, the scoping side. When you start fishing these fish, and especially in clear water, you can call a fish from a long ways. And if they're 20 feet down, you have your bait, say 5 feet down, and they come up and eat it. For some reason, once that thermocline develops, I learned that you could start having problems with releasing fish. And so I would quit. And I guess if that answers your question, but I don't know. It's a really cool, uncharted area, and over a period of many years. And then I brought other people into my boat, some really good fishermen like Kevin Goldberg or Billy Beekner was one. And I'd start asking questions like, what speed do you run when you open water troll? Oh, I run 3.2. Well, that's what I'm catching too. You ask the next guy, oh, I run 3.1, or I run 4, and you start putting more pieces to the puzzle together. It's really a wild deal. And I think I'm always looking for a new advantage on the water, right? I want to learn every aspect of the game of muskies. So that's where the open water came from. It was just a different way of fishing.
Yeah. When we started to adopt that pulling off a structure, targeting deeper structure, I guess that second break line, the third break line, or that transition from rock to sand. And I wrote an article for one of the Musky Hunter books, the 25 more summer tactics, or whatever it was called, might even be here somewhere. I talked specifically about fishing those deep edges, and we instantly upped our game, and we encountered bigger fish, more fish that hadn't been caught before, those clean fish. And looking back over these past 6-7 years, nothing has improved our fishing more than pulling away from structure and having confidence that we can make it happen. And yet in 2025, we're going into a world where everyone's like, oh my God, you guys are fishing deep, like you're the enemy. And I think there's going to be middle ground in there. Tonight's not the night to dig into that, but I find it super interesting that that bite has always been there, and guys like yourself have looked for that bite. And I think there's so much out there. And I think on these shield lakes that, Eagle Lake, there's a 60-inch plus fish that doesn't come up to structure. It's out over open water, and some people see it once in a while. Like those fish are there. They're rare up here. It's not like some of the Minnesota waters, but you have to be willing to put yourself in some of those positions where maybe you're not super comfortable, to try and encounter them. And I know you guys are like a week away from your open season here, Brad. What are you looking, what's it looking like as we wrap this one up? Give people an idea what, you're looking at for the next week and a half here for weather going into your opener.
Yeah. So, one of the advantages, I guess, living local here to a bunch of different musky lakes is I've spent some time on the water already this year, just scoping out weed beds, checking out where bait's at, and things are looking super positive. And the Wisconsin opener was just last weekend. Tons of good results. I'm hearing a lot of positivity about catches and seeing fish.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say our spawn, keep in mind, our spawn doesn't end in one day. Some of that drags out. But from what I'm hearing from the boys in Wisconsin, even up in the northern portions of the state, the spawn is pretty much done. They started seeing those fish transitioning on Saturday and Sunday to deeper water, which is encouraging. And I would say that Minnesota is right there as well. Now, you get into northern with Minnesota, you might see a little difference, but amazingly enough, just talking to people on Leech and what have you, the water temps are still 54 degrees-ish. So quite possibly most of those fish are done spawning as well. So it's setting up for what I would say a really good opener. And the weed growth looks good. So I'm excited. It reminds me, and I've said this a couple times in the podcast that I'm involved in, it reminds me of that 05 to 08 period when we had kind of an early spring like this where things really got going quick. We had that huge warm up. We were in the 90s here a couple weeks ago, and then it plummeted. We were back into the 30s. I think we had a high of 38 one day. So, but that the cool thing is that it was up in those 90s for quite some time. And I think it allowed the fish to do their cycle and get it over with in a quick fashion versus a cold front bumping them and starting over again. And so I think it's setting up to be a really good season.
Yeah, I spoke with Herbie the other day, and we're talking about Wisconsin opener and how you're hearing these reports of 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 fish weekends, and I'm like, nothing will take away the memory of last year's struggles like a good. I wish you the best of luck this year, Brad, and I love listening to you guys on Backlash. It's one of the podcasts I listen to every week. Keep it up. I think you guys are doing an amazing job over there, and keep up all the good work at Musky Mayhem. It's one of those staple baits that every musky angler's had in their box at one time or another. And I think there's a lot that you guys can, take away from that. And when it's all said and done and you guys sell and you retire to Arizona or wherever it is you're going to go, I think you and Carrie can look back and put your feet up and say, we did something really special in that industry. And I don't think anybody's going to ever argue with that. And when I started doing these podcasts, it was a little kind of selfish of me. I wanted to talk to my, my heroes and the idols I had in the industry. And I always kind of finish it with, this episode of 54 minutes with insert name of legend here. And you certainly fit that bill. And I like that you stay super active in this industry. I think that's just so important, and it speaks so much to your character. So thank you so much for doing this. Wish you the best of luck. And I hope Musky Mayhem has an amazing year celebrating 20 years in this industry. And in a lot of ways, you guys have, carved out such a huge part of this industry. So congratulations on that.
Well, I greatly appreciate that, Glenn, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast, as well as I can't thank all the people, the consumers that have purchased our baits over the years. It means a ton, and we hopefully can keep servicing them for many years to come. So I greatly appreciate all our customers, that's for sure. And I wish everybody a great season, and yourself included in that, Glenn.
Well, we appreciate that. And with any luck, we'll send you guys a couple pictures of some mayhem catches along the way. And we'll be in touch over the course of the year here too, Brad, because I got a couple ideas in my sleeve that I want to run by you too. So,
Sure.
guys, this has been another episode of what's turning out to be just so much fun for me to do on a personal level, and I know so many of our viewers are really enjoying this. So this has been Brad Hoppe from Musky Mayhem Tackle, and I'll catch you guys in a couple weeks. I'm probably going to take a few weeks off here as we kind of get prepared for our musky season in a inside of a month now. And just as a quick side note, I probably won't have very many guests on as we go through the season. We will pick this up again in the fall, but I do have a couple more people lined up, and I want to go back with some of our guests in the fall, and Brad may be one of those people where we could come back and look at, what the summer was. So guys, thank you so much. Brad, thank you for doing this. I truly appreciate it.
Anytime. I'm here for you. You needed something, let me know.